Before we get into this week's show, I want to give you the 3 challenges for the month of June. Please know that these are not sponsors, but just friends that we support, so helping them helps us. The first challenge is to go watch Dead Drift on Amazon Prime. You don't need to be an Amazon Prime member to watch Dead Drift, so please go watch it, then come back and post in the comments what you think. Our second challenge for the month of June is to go try Glenmorangie Quinta Raban 12-year and let us know what you think. If you are in Western Washington, it is available at Louis G's in Fife. So go take a few sips, then post in the comments what you think. We want to hear from you on this. The third and final challenge for the month of June is to go to thewhiskeypeople.com for all your whiskey education needs. No matter if you want to be a server at a restaurant that knows what they're talking about, a bartender extraordinaire, an entrepreneur starting your own distillery, or just a whiskey snob that needs to know more. This is the place to get your education and become a true whiskey nerd. Now, on with the show.
Alright, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Nerds Drink Whiskey. This is the final episode of this series of episodes in my backyard. We got one more that we're going to do after we have burgers and pie. Because if I'm going to cheat on my diet, I'm going to cheat on my friggin' diet.
Burgers and pie.
So nobody's offended by burgers and pie, it seems. So this is an American single malt whiskey, and what is the difference between American single malt whiskey and Scotch?
Well, Scotch is made in Scotland, and
that's pretty much it.
That's pretty much, as far as labeling goes, that's it.
So, and I knew that, but I wanted to ask him that to make a point that if you see single malt, that is basically Scotch. It's just made in America, and so there are rules. You can't call it bourbon if it's made out of the United States. You can't call it, obviously you can't call it Irish whiskey if it's made out of Ireland. You can't call it Canadian whiskey if you make it outside of Canada. There are certain rules of whiskey, certain laws, and even though it's an international and nobody, people from Scotland aren't going to come and attack your distillery if you, the Scottish government isn't going to come down and shut down your distillery. There's just a certain respectability. Like, hey, if you're from America, you call it single malt. But that is basically Scotch. That is, they're doing it under the rules of Scotch.
Mark, so, they do have a lot of lawsuits in labeling in the whiskey community. You have to be careful because, like, Glenlivet and the Glenlivet are two different things. All right.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I mean, they are very sensitive. Now, one of the things that people ask me as an instructor is, what does single malt mean, anyways? Is it like malt you put in your chocolate? What are you talking about? And why not call it multi-malt? Or double malt or triple malt? And those are good questions. Single malt is a way of saying that you have 100% barley that's malted to the same length of time. Malting, by the way, is when the barley pops its seed and it sprouts, right? And you're basically taking the shell of the seed away, and it's those sprouts that, when dried, produce the sugar we need, mixed with yeast and water, and then put into a barrel, call it whiskey. And so single malt whiskey is uniformly sprouted to 3 days out of the seed.
Interesting. So now you see why we have this guy on our show. He knows way more than us. Go to thewhiskeypeople.com for his organization and more education on whiskey. So this is a local distillery. Have you ever heard of the Probably Shouldn't Distillery?
Probably shouldn't.
So I love the name. I know nothing about it. It's from Everson, Washington. I'm from Washington State. I've lived in Washington State off and on, other than Garden Grove, California. Off and on all my life. I've never heard of Everson, Washington. Have you?
Not at all. I thought it was Everett, Washington, and nope, it's Everson.
Everson, Washington.
Yeah.
We've never heard of this distillery. We've never even heard of this city. We're from Washington State, and we've never heard of this Washington State distillery. The town the city that this distillery is from.
Likely has 10-20% of the population at Tenino.
We're guessing that it's a very small city. So, anyways, they probably shouldn't distillery. They have a Facebook page, I guess. It's single malt. It's non-chill filtered. Double pot distilled. I don't know.
It's the same.
It's let's see.
We're 40%.
Yeah, 40%. So small batch artisans. They quote Mark Twain. It's one of the best Mark Twain quotes ever. Too much of anything is bad, but too much whiskey is barely enough. So and after several episodes today, I'm feeling that statement.
Absolutely.
So we're going to try this, and we're going to see what we think about probably shouldn't American single malt whiskey. Dark Helmet, do your thing.
Ludicrous speed.
Wow. Okay. What's your thoughts, Gabe?
Honestly, that went down very, very smoothly. I'm very, very surprised with that being single malt, but then again, I'm also kind of a Scotch guy anyways. Really, really, really smooth flavor going down. I don't know about any particular notes, but I would say definitely creamy going down when I was first tasting it. The finish is very, very smooth. There's really not much bite there at all. Honestly, probably shouldn't. I think maybe I should again.
Yeah, it's definitely not a bite. It's definitely not a burn. It's more of a bite, but it's just a very, very pleasant bite. Maybe my standards my expectations were extremely low for this one, so maybe that's why I'm so impressed. We have a much more jaded person, much more experienced whiskey drinker next to us. So, Treacy, what do you think?
Well, this thing had an interesting front end involving, if you think of like caramelized walnuts or something like that. That was at first what made it interesting, and then didn't know when to stop, and it turned into a simple sugar, which means I suspect I can't know, of course, that something was added to this thing. It wasn't normal for a barley to taste quite like this in a barrel, okay? Mm-hmm. It didn't have an age statement, okay, so that I can tell, and that's fine. It's at least 2 years. In Scotland, that generally is a few more years more. And then I looked at just how it didn't finish, it needs to.
Yeah. So for a single malt, it didn't have near as much of a finish. Me being a fan of triple distilled, at least 10 years in a barrel, I'm probably a bigger fan of this than I should be.
Well, and everybody has their own flavors, Mark. I mean, this for me it's a little one-dimensional, okay? And I've come to expect multi-dimensional whiskeys, and some of those dimensions will offend a lot of people, and that's why the single-dimensional whiskeys will have broader popular appeal, mm-hmm. and that's great because we need to keep everybody happy.
Yeah.
And I'm just a little fussy, as you say.
Okay, so down the line, Gabe, what did we pay for this? $40. Okay, so $40. Would you pay $40 for this whiskey?
Yes.
Okay, I would definitely pay $40 for this whiskey. I am way more impressed by this than I expected. Again, my expectations were extremely low, being a distiller I've never heard of. From a city I've never heard of, but I'm very pleasantly surprised by this. This is pretty good. Treacy, I'm guessing you're a no.
Well, I would take that $40 and I would probably apply it toward half a bottle of the Westland single malt out of Seattle. Another local, because it has a more interesting flavor to it.
Now, Westland is, correct me if I'm wrong, and you'd be the person that could correct me if I'm wrong, but Westland are the kings of Northwest single malt.
Well, American single malt, to be precise. I mean, there's very little going on outside of the Northwest in single malt.
Yeah.
They've been given the resources to really fully develop a Washington-only sourced whiskey. I'm excited about all kinds of things, and we should cover it in a different episode. But when you look at some of the whiskeys coming out of the Northwest, we simply have to make sure we accurately describe them. And I feel that, again, most people are going to like this, okay, as a whiskey. It's just I expect more out of the single malt. We discussed expression, and this is more of a peep than a roar, or certainly not a song.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah, it's definitely you can tell by the color. Now, one thing I gotta give props to the Probably Shouldn't Distillery for not using, as far as I could tell, artificial coloring. If you are a distillery who uses artificial, this is our last episode for a while. Artificial coloring in your, and there's a certain distillery, we won't mention the names, but the only distillery to run us out of the distillery uses, we are told some people have noticed some coloring in their whiskey. So, but it appears that the Probably Shouldn't Distillery is honest. They do not use coloring. Props to them for that. So we're going to be contacting them, tagging them on this post. So I recommend. Probably shouldn't is a probably should. So see you next week. Nerds Drink Whiskey.